Welcome to Interstellar Cosmic Conversations, where we share experiences from our hearts to empower others. Hello, James. Welcome to Interstellar Cosmic Conversations. It is so exciting to have you as a guest. And James and I are going to be discussing alien races, reptilian and military abductions, who and what they are, and the roles they play in this universe. James has investigated these subjects for over 25 years and currently has his own internet show called The Cosmic Switchboard. There's an in-depth description of James that will be shared on my website when this is posted. So just, check out the website, get a good feel for what James does, and then enjoy the conversation that we're having. So welcome, James.
Thank you, Patricia. I've really been looking forward to this discussion. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you for being here because I've been looking forward to it too.
And the thing about this exchange that we've been having, and once again the attempts at disruption kick in prior to the onset of our discussion here, but that just it's more fuel to the fire. It tells us that what we're doing here is the right thing to do at this time.
Yeah, exactly. And so what James and I are co-creating here is something that's new and something I'm really excited about. As a person myself that went on a journey through religion, through the political arena, all of that, I was very involved. And as a seeker of truth, I questioned anything that was being presented to me. So in that quest for truth, I would have question after question after question, and I was just irritated the crap out of pastors and rabbis because I would look at the texts that were being presented to me in religion and I would see how they would contradict one another. And then I started really looking at politics and figuring out it didn't matter what your political beliefs were, if you were a Republican or a Democrat or an independent, whoever got into office, whatever their truth claims were, whatever they were going to present to the public, never really took place once they were put into office. So it didn't matter if you had an all-Republican or an all-Democrat government. It was this funny game that they were playing because nothing that they ever promised actually came to pass. They would give you like little nuggets to keep you like, oh, okay, well, they tried. But, there was never anything that actually came into being. And so I was questioning that. I was questioning everything through religion. So as I started becoming aware of the deception, I can't say I became aware of truth. I became aware of deception. And in doing so, I started really searching on the internet for what truth is. And I would come across all of this information that seemed totally bizarre to me. Even though some would be intriguing, it scared me a little bit. It also made me question my own sanity. And the more that you become aware that you have been deceived, the crazier you become to those around you, your friends and your family, because you seem to be the wacky one because they're so committed to their beliefs. If you try to share where you are, they just think you have lost your mind, that you're nutty and you're untrustworthy. And so one of the reasons that I want to do what I'm doing with James and some other people is I want to have an opportunity for people that are coming out of their religious, political, scientific, whatever belief systems to have a source of information that starts kind of from the beginning and allows them to go on a journey of discovery that kind of is in a good enflowment that allows them to see truth in a way that makes sense to them. So, James, what I would like to do with you today is ask you to share, what questions did you start asking that made you start being interested in the alien military type abductions? Did you have any personal life experiences, or were you just around other people that did and it just got your interest? So let's just start there.
That's a very good question, Patricia. With me, I'd always been interested in this subject, and this interest was uh, like added onto, if you will, by a number of sightings throughout my life and a number of unusual experiences. I'd had a lot of psychic experiences, a lot of astral travel experiences, but I could never, well, I wasn't able to kind of get a better understanding of it till much further down the track. I didn't have a conceptual framework. That was the problem. I was always interested in the unusual, other dimensions, the Bermuda Triangle, Sasquatch, UFOs, demonology,
Mm.
and what have you. So everything kind of fell under that kind of umbrella. And over the years, I'd had a number of UFO sightings, some quite close. I've seen a cigar-shaped craft up close. I've seen a globe-shaped craft above me create its own cloud bank to hide in. I watched it create the cloud bank. I ran away from what I thought was an abduction experience when I was younger, and I only told a very few people about that. But it wasn't until the 1988 to 1990 time frame that a more clear picture began to emerge. Because in '88, I had a lot of experiences. I still didn't have a conceptual framework. I would wake up and I would be sliding along the roof of my bedroom. Now, my bedroom was an addition to the back of the house, so there was some large 2x4s, at intervals across the ceiling there. And yet, as I slid across the ceiling, I did not bump up against any of those 2x4s. I went right through them. And then I was taken through the ceiling, and I don't remember anything beyond that. And upon awakening in the morning, and in that experience, I actually recall having a white bed sheet that I went to sleep with. When I was sliding along on the ceiling, the white bed sheet was hanging down from me, right?
Wow.
Which kind of gave it like a sense of authenticity,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Because gravity was still working for the bed sheet, but it wasn't working for me. And I'd also had other experiences when I was younger where I would have a dream, quote unquote, of being pulled through my ceiling and going up into a dark tunnel with my arms and legs. Well, I'm kind of like in a U-shaped position, pointed downwards towards the ground, and my arms and legs out in front of me, and I'm being pulled as if by a giant magnet from my back, like my back is being sucked up, right?
Mm.
And I had experiences like that. I had experiences where I saw a very large circular blue light that was cast onto my wall when this is about year 10, year 11, sophomore, junior in high school. I'm one of those people that I have cyclical alien ET experiences, so they tend to come to me in cycles and come to me in waves, whereas some people, it comes to them very rarely, once every several years, thereabouts. Others really frequently. Like, I've since come to learn this over time, that some people have things practically every week, multiple times during a week. But with me, things go in cycles, and I've since come to understand that. And my high school years, sophomore, year 10, year 11, that was another one of those periods when I was having a lot of experiences. And during that time frame, I was laying in bed, and I saw a big bluish white circle cast onto the bedroom wall. And I go, well, that's unusual, right? I was in a dark room, and I kind of turned away because it was kind of eerie. It was scary. I momentarily had the thought pop into my mind, UFOs or aliens, and I quickly dismissed that thought out of my mind. And I found out much later why, because although I had the curiosity going on about UFOs, about the Bermuda Triangle, what have you, there was this resistance within me to believe it had anything to do with me. It was something that I wanted to believe was external to me, that had nothing to do with me. At arm's length, I could deal with it much better that way. So, but when I started thinking about it, too deeply, I would start to, have anxious moments and worry. And so I see this big blue circle on my wall in a darkened bedroom. I turn away because I don't want to look at it. The thought of ETs and aliens prop up in my mind. I quickly dismiss it. And then after a while, curiosity kicks in. I roll back over, and now I see a big blue white triangle on my wall. And now curiosity really gets the better of me. I get up to look at the triangle up close. Next thing you know, my face, my consciousness was right up against the wall instantaneously. I turn around, and there's my body still lying in bed. So all that time, I was already out of my body, because during that time frame, I've since come to understand, I'm going to sound like a broken record by saying that a lot, but I realized at that time the different ET groups, or maybe even just one ET group, was getting me conditioned to the idea that I had an existence outside of my physical body. I was having a lot of out-of-body experiences at that time. This is the sophomore, junior time frame. I would hear a high-pitched tone in my ear and kind of a heat sensation, and I'm laying in bed, and I'm thinking that, man, I can't get to sleep. I'm just restless. Have too much energy, but all along, I'd already be out of my body. I wouldn't realize I was already out of my body, and my consciousness was already out of my body, right? So that was going on. Many, countless out-of-body experiences during that time frame. I was reading Carlos Castaneda books, right? Because, again, I always had that interest in metaphysical, esoteric issues. But I did not want to think that I had a personal involvement in the ET phenomenon, because I remember back in '73 when the big UFO wave happened in America, and the story of Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker came out, Pascagoula, Mississippi, where they were abducted, taken on board a craft. I read about that book in a UFO book I'd bought. I'd read about that case, rather. And then '75 rolls around, Travis Walton experience. The guy is taken for 5 days, right? Mm-hmm. And I had an inner foreboding when I'd hear these stories, because all during that time frame, I would have been 73, 75. I would have been 9, 10, 11 years old. I was having a lot of nosebleeds at the time. I'd wake up.
I just want to ask you one quick question. When you're saying out of body, because I want this to be clear to people hearing, and I have something to share when you're done with that. When you say out of body experiences, to you, is that an abduction?
I've since come to find out that they do abduct people astrally. That's happened to me too. And I think at the time, whatever this intelligence was, these ETs were conditioning me to the concept of out-of-body travel. And because I still am a really big reader, when I started having these out-of-body experiences, the first thing I did was I went out and I got Robert Monroe's book, Journeys Out of the Body, and then subsequent sequels after that. And I learned a lot of techniques out of that, because a lot of times, and I've since come to understand, the lower astral is kind of a very highly energized, at times kind of a fear-generated plane, at times a sexually driven kind of plane, the lower astral. And so when I would find myself in the lower astral, all this fear and all this foreboding would kick in, and sometimes these entities or whoever was behind it, they wouldn't let me get back to my body immediately. I'd have to stay out of my body for a certain length of time before I could come back. And so reading that book, Journeys Out of the Body by Robert Monroe, that really helped me out, because he taught techniques of how to go back to your body when you need to. So that was really good. So I had all this going on in my life, and I remember when Mork and Mindy, the very popular TV sitcom, came along. There was an element of that show that really frightened me. I didn't watch it for the first several episodes. Everyone at school was talking about it because it was so funny. Robin Williams is from the San Francisco Bay Area, where I'm from. So, I found out later he used to give stand-up at North Beach and places like that. But I was terrified of the whole concept. I remember Mork showed up in an episode of Happy Days first, right? And then later on they created this whole series out of him. But the first several episodes I didn't watch, because that context, that subject of aliens and ETs, I didn't want anything to do with it. It was okay for me to read about it, right? But I didn't want to plug into it to that extent. And I remember when the Barney and Betty Hill movie came out, about Barney and Betty Hill getting abducted when they were on a trip in New Hampshire, I think it was. That show terrified me. I couldn't even watch it, right? I couldn't even watch it the whole way through. So there'd always been this kind of foreboding. The subject matter, although I was interested in it at an intellectual level, at a deep level, it really kind of frightened me. And so, to kind of bring it up to date, 88, 90 time frame, I was being pulled through the ceiling. I was having all these weird experiences, culminated in 1990 when I come back from Germany. I'd spent 3 months there trying to learn as much German as I could. And then the last couple of weeks in Germany, I started getting this creepy crawly feeling of being watched again, which intermittently throughout my life, I'd had this feeling of being watched, being under observation. And I began sleeping with the lights on. This is something I did when I was younger. And the last couple of weeks in Germany, I was really getting anxious again. And then I flew back to California, was living again in San Jose, California. And then within about 2-3 weeks of my returning from Germany, in San Jose, California, I had a series of ET UFO sightings, culminating in a full-blown alien abduction event where I woke up and I saw 3 reptilian grays in my bedroom, one right by my head over here, one at the foot of the bed, and one by the door. I'd went to sleep with the room completely dark, but somehow they were emitting their own kind of ambient light source. They were grayish skin. They had a blue vest. They had some kind of symbol or something on their vest, and they had clawed hands, what the late great Dr. Carla Turner called chicken claws. They weren't fingers with long nails. They were 3 claws, and I remember looking at the claws of the one that was closest to me, and I just kind of rolled over and looked at the wall, right? Because I didn't want to look at it. And it told me telepathically, don't worry about it. You're just having a nightmare. Go back to sleep. I distinctly remember it telling me that. And then it brought in this female entity, this hideous female entity that simulated sexual intercourse with me. I doubt it really did, because from the neck down, I couldn't feel anything because I was immobilized. All I could do was turn my head to the left to look at the wall, or kind of roll my head to the left and to the right with my eyes pinched closed. Meanwhile, this entity, it was a grayish entity, had mammaries, hideous face, long black hair, big eyes. It was some kind of a hybrid, and it was simulating intercourse with me. And the whole time I was just pinching my eyes closed because I was terrified. And believe it or not, things degenerated from there, because somehow I wound up on the craft. And I remember my head was tilted down, and I don't know if I was floating, being levitated along, or my toes were dragging along on the floor. But I was being led around a long curving corridor with a reptilian gray in front and 2 on either side. And something was done to my vision. The radius of my vision only extended several feet. So I could only, my head was tilted down, I could only see a certain distance around me. And then as we came out of that curving corridor, we entered along what I got the sensation of a lot of space. We entered a long room and was going down like a central aisle. And on either side, within the periphery of my vision, I could see tables with what I perceived to be other people laying on them in various states of undress, right? I just assumed that there were people like me, right? And I had no context again. I knew about Calvin Parker and Charles Hickson, and I knew about Whitley Strieber because I'd seen him on TV, right? And I knew about Travis Walton, but again, there was something that I wanted to keep at a distance. I'd never thought for a million years that it would be me, that, right? And so they took me to a table at the far end of the room, and they did these flexing exercises on me, where nothing or no one was touching me, but I was made to involuntarily do all these sit-ups, stomach crunchers, and at one point I was laying on my belly, and they bent me back so far I could feel the back of my head touching my heels. And then in between grunts, I asked this blue entity, who seemed to be giving the orders to these little tannish kind of beings that were running around on either side very fast all around the table. And I asked, what are you doing? And this bluish entity told me, we're taking your energy, which didn't make sense to me until years later. A friend of mine in the research field told me they were probably activating your chakras and siphoning it off. And then voyage of discovery. I moved to San Diego. I joined the San Diego UFO Society, and my friend who ran the San Diego UFO Society was also a hypnotherapist. He regressed me, and then out of that, I remembered full-blown, previously unremembered experience I had when I was about 4 or 5 years old in Texas, near the Gulf of Mexico. I remember that experience for a number of years, and then it was completely stripped from my conscious memory. It was a small brownish being that was levitating in my bedroom that telepathically spoke to me, and I tried to kick it out because I wasn't scared. I was just territorial. I didn't want this thing around my toys and whatnot. You know what I mean? So
That's funny.
so yeah, and so what happened was, because I always had this history, interest in history, military history, and UFOs and what have you, I began just, in order to kind of control the fear,
Mm-hmm.
because I got really jumpy there for a while after that full-blown experience and others that happened before and after that. I just immersed myself in as many UFO books, alien abduction books as I could, and that gave me the grounding. It gave me the framework. It gave me a sense of relief that I'm not the only one. This has been going on all along, you see.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much, in a nutshell, how it started for me.
Okay. Well, there's one thing I want to go back to, because I was just curious, because when you went to Germany and you wanted to learn as much German as you could, what took you to Germany, and what made you want to learn the German language?
Well, I do believe that there was some kind of karmic aspect to it, and I've always had a love of history, love of military history. The Germans in World War II, and reading about the 30 Years War, which ravaged what we would call Germany today. So all that stuff was interesting to me, and so the opportunity came via the school I was attending to do a foreign language study program there. So I jumped at it, and then I found myself right there on the border. I mean, this is the area where a lot of the Grimm's fairy tales come from, is
Right.
the Black Forest, not too far from the Swiss border right there. So that's where I found myself. And yeah, it was just kind of a homecoming for me in many ways.
Okay. And I wanted to go back to one of the reasons I asked about the out-of-body experience, because what I feel is occurring is there are so many abductions going on, and so many things that start to happen in our early childhood. And your child will say, well, there's someone in my closet, there's someone under the bed, and our parents are like, well, you're just having a bad dream, it's just your imagination, it's something you ate, you watched it on TV, now you're having nightmares, or just fears that aren't real. And they're actually grooming you for the abductions, or you're actually experiencing abductions. And something that I can remember, well, I'll just go to this. I remember at 5 years old, well, I started having a lot of things occur that from my memory at 5, which were sexual molestations and things. And I feel like that was preparing me in many ways for a lot of the things that would come after the fact. But I can remember somewhere between the age of 5 and 7-ish, riding down the road in the backseat of a car and looking up at the moon, and I knew that, and I wasn't allowed to watch television and things very often, so I wasn't exposed to things that the average kid was. So these weren't things that I had seen, and all of a sudden they were like part of something that I'm creating from a television series. So I would look at the moon, and I knew that I was being watched, not the man in the moon like that we were. It was just like, for me, I was like, I knew it didn't make sense. There was something about it that I was very aware of, and I feel like that's because of the history that I was having with abductions and things that I just wasn't consciously aware of necessarily, but I just knew that there was something wrong with it. But my first conscious experience that I had blocked out until later in life was when I was around 12. And for 48 hours, I was on a sofa in the living room of our home, and I couldn't be awakened. I was shaken and yelled at and, whatever to try to get me to awake. And it didn't occur at all. And my mom, I had such an abusive childhood that there was no way my mom was going to take me to a doctor for that because it would have exposed other things going on, in the household. So that just didn't happen. But I had shut that down for most of my life. And when I started becoming aware of the things going on, I had a memory of that. And what I remember is I remember that I was out of my body at that time. And I could actually go back now and tell you everything that went on in that room, because even though I wasn't there, I could visually see myself laying there. It was summer and I was in a winter jacket and winter clothing, laying on a sofa, and I could see my mom over me and all the interaction that we had where she was trying to awaken me. However, I wasn't there, but I remember being over where I could see everything like what you were describing. So that was really interesting to me. And I still, like I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what was happening. And so, I just had memories, of things that have been going on later on in life. So this is really important that you shared that and that we're talking about this for those that have grown up in families where if you tried to share an experience, they didn't want to hear. They wanted to just like turn it into like a nightmare or something that, maybe that you have mental issues and you might need to go see a therapist. So that these people can become aware that, hey, these are real experiences. You're not crazy. It wasn't a dream. Investigate what you experienced. Go into in those memories and start questioning it and allow yourself to feel exactly what was taking place so that you can start to understand your own journey and the traumas that you may have experienced, and allow yourself to trust your own self in that. Just trust who you are, trust what you experienced, forget what everybody else is telling you.
Yes, absolutely. I look back on my childhood and there was a lot of red flags. If there had been, people around in the field that we know today and they were around back then, they would have picked it up immediately. Like the nosebleeds, repetitive nosebleeds where I'd wake up and the pillow would be covered, saturated in blood. In one occasion, this would have been mid 1970s. I distinctly remember feeling a presence when I was laying in bed, and my eyes were shut, my eyelids were shut, but I could see a light source, in the room. And for some reason, I'm sorry, my nose keeps itching. Go figure. And I felt and sensed the light source behind my closed eyelids, and then I felt a very cold steel long, what we would now call a probe, being pushed up my left nostril, and then suddenly pop, this incredible pain, and then I just blacked out. And then I woke up in the morning to find blood all over the pillow, and dried, encrusted blood on my nose and the side of my face. And when I was a young boy, I had those kind of pajamas, those jammies that were kind of like a one-piece suit. I don't know what you call them, but they had the little attached booties at the, that you slide your feet into.
Well, and we call them onesies for babies. So
okay, onesies. So, but I was kind of like, I was beyond baby age, probably like 5 or maybe older. I was kind of slow developer, and I had this onesie that was all gray, and it had the attached booties, and the underside of the booties was like white, and all I was missing was the big ears. I thought I looked like Bugs Bunny actually, and so I would wake up in the morning and I would find dirt and stickers beneath the sole pads of the little booties, right? As if I'd been outside, you see. Dirt, like mud sometimes, stickers, grass, bits of grass. Other times I would wake up and I would find my nightshirt and my underwear backwards and inside out. And this has been known to happen. Some of these ETs are pretty dumb. They don't put the clothes on, back on the child quite right. And so I'd wake up and the underwear would be inside out and backwards. The shirt would be, inside out and backwards. It was like a rush job, and they sent me back. Mm-hmm. My family would find me at times everywhere but where I was supposed to be sleeping, which was an upper bunk bed. Okay, there was a metal desk that I used to use to help me climb up into the upper bunk bed, And sometimes at night, they would find me laying on the metal desk. They would find me under the metal desk on the floor. They would find me in another part of the house. And, they wrote it off. Maybe he's sleepwalking, right?
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. But, never once did I fall. Never once did I bang my head when I was sleepwalking, right? But later on, when I was in my high school years and I had another cycle of experiences and abductions roll around, the same thing started happening. I'd wake up, I'd go, how did I get here? I know I slept in my bed. And then I'd wake up in the sofa in the living room, right? And another time when I came back in 1990 from Germany, this was before that abduction experience I described earlier. I dropped my friend off from work. He worked swing shift. In fact, we used to work together, but I had to quit the job because I went off to Germany, right? Well, I used to work there sometime before then, but he was an old mate of mine, so I agreed to pick him up that night. So I picked him up when he got off work at 10:30, drove him back home. He only lived, as the crow flies, a couple of blocks down the street from me, so it was no big deal. So I dropped him off at his house, and was Jay Leno there at the time? Yeah, Jay Leno by now was the guy who hosted the Tonight Show, and so I chatted with him, and as Jay Leno started his monologue to start the Tonight Show, I said, okay, I'm gonna take off now, and then I go out, get into my car, and as I pull out into the street, I look over to check the traffic, and that's the last thing I remember. Next thing I remember was coming to with my car perfectly parked in front of my house. The first thing I noticed was the house across the street from where we lived, and then immediately I looked down to the ignition to see the ignition key, turned off, and then I looked to my right to see the house, right, where I lived. And I felt these electric currents coursing through my body. My body felt like lead. Everything was stiff, my arms, legs, my chest. And I knew something had happened, right? And it took me a good 5-10 minutes because I was in a state of terror, basically. It took me a good 5-10 minutes to get out of the car, and I was all stiff. And so I'm walking out of the car crab-like, looking up into the sky, looking up all around, right? Because I just had some intuitive feeling that I was just returned from somewhere, like from space or something, I don't know. And I was just praying that the front door was open, right? Mm-hmm. Because if it wasn't open, then I'd have to go around to the back, kind of jimmy the glass sliding door, because again, I lived in that addition part of the house that was added on later. And so sure enough, the front door was closed. I'm wondering where my dogs are, right? And then they must have been inside. So I go around the side of the house, go to the back, kind of jimmy the sliding door, open it, go in, and then I go into my bedroom back there. And see, what was going on was I didn't realize it at the time because I was having the series of experiences again. At one point, I thought I was being haunted, Patricia, because I was having so many unusual experiences. I thought all the presences around me were ghosts or something, or demons, I don't know. And so as a result, I would sleep with the lights on a lot of times, and I would sleep with a telly or the radio on to kind of comfort me. And so when I came into my bedroom door, the first thing I did was I clicked the on switch for the power stick in which all these plugs were stuck into, and immediately the TV comes on, the radio blasts out, it's a rock and roll station, the lights come on, and ironically, I kid you not, the song that was blasting out of my stereo was the song Lights Out by the band UFO. Okay. The big English band, rock band in the 70s and 80s, UFO. That was a song that was playing, right? I go, oh, geez, right? And so that's an example it's an example of a location displacement missing time experience where the last thing I remembered was pulling out of my friend's apartment driveway, checking to see the cross traffic, blackout. Next thing you know, I'm waking up, in this, and parked in front of my car, my body feeling like lead, electrical currents running through me, and just totally discombobulated, right? Yeah. So, but I still didn't catch on, until a couple of weeks later when those 3 aliens showed up, in my bedroom. Now, also during that time frame, it could have been after that, I saw a little gray looking out of my TV. Okay, here's an example where people have to understand that the UFO alien encounter ET experience is multifaceted. It's not just the generic, they take you up into a craft, lay you into on a medical table and do these medical procedures to you. That's a very small part of what happens to you. A lot of the things they do to us happens right in our own bedrooms. They don't even have to, abduct us. And some of this happens out of body. Some of this happens in our dreams. A lot of us, and this goes back to childhood, I was always having UFO dreams, dreams of ETs, UFO invasions, and all this stuff. And I was going through that phase when I came back from Germany, and I was sleeping with my lights on. And remember in those days, Patricia, when it's not like the 24/7 satellite TV coverage, cable coverage we have now. It's like come about midnight, it's like they would have the Star Spangled Banner, and then after that you would have the color bars, and after that it would turn into snow, right?
Yeah, and then it's
exactly. And because I was always scared at the time, I would leave the TV on, right? So I fell asleep with the lights on, and I had a split screen going on in my mind where I was laying in bed, and I could clearly see my brother in his room, clear across the other side of the house, looking at his TV set. And me in my room, I'm seeing myself sleeping there on the bed with the lights on. However, now instead of just the snow on the TV screen, there was the image of what we would call a gray today. I didn't know what they were called back then, but it was the image, the outline of a gray with the big black eyes. And it was zapping me. It was something coming out of the gray in the TV screen was going right into my brain. And then meanwhile, the split screen image, my brother was seeing the exact same thing in his room, right? Except he was wide awake. He's my younger brother by a couple of years. And in order to test his reality, get this, he punched the dresser in his bedroom in order to make sure he wasn't dreaming or something, I guess. And when he punched the dresser, it sounded as if he punched the wall I was laying up against, because the sound was so loud in my mind, I woke up. And then I looked immediately to the TV screen, and now it would just snow again, right? But I knew what I just seen. Now, the next morning, get this, is interesting. And it's interesting how people project out their fears on you.
Yeah.
Every time I walked by my brother, he was sitting in the living room, he'd give me dirty looks, right? I just think of whatever, And then I'd say, oh, what's going on? He would just glare at me. And so this happened several times. I'm walking back and forth from my room, to the bathroom, to the kitchen, whatever. Finally, I had to ask him, like, what's up? Why are you copping this attitude towards me? And then long story short, he basically blamed me for what happened the night before, right? He took me into his bedroom. He showed me, you see that dent? I hit that dresser to make sure I wasn't dreaming. Yeah, I remember. I told him, because I heard that bang sound right in my ears if he punched my wall. But it's interesting that it happened to the both of us, and he's figured my next youngest brother in a number of my UFO related dreams too, where he and I would be alone in a house and there'd be no furniture and UFOs would be flying around, and we would see them pass. We had a like skylight, in the addition room, and then we would see like a lighted craft fly over it. We'd be all freaking out because it would just be me and him in there. I had a number of dreams with him in it. So I'm sorry, I've been gabbing.
Abducted. Both of you all were abducted?
Yeah, the youngest brother too. My next younger brother, a couple of years, 2-3 years behind me, and then my youngest brother. He was born in 1970, like 6 years after I was born. So all of us have had experiences.
So let me ask you this: were your parents having any experiences, or did they share that with you?
Well, I got the feeling that my mom had experiences. My mom has always been what you would call very psychic, right?
Okay.
She's like me, a Scorpio, so she's got the psychic thing going on. But my parents, being from the Philippines, the old country, and remember, for like 400 years, the Spanish occupied the Philippines rather. So the native lore, the native folklore, the native belief in asawang monsters, the native belief in supernatural witches and all this stuff. Then you overlay on top of that 400 years of Catholic guilt, repression, and Inquisition, and all this other jive, right? And so they both believed in otherworldly things.
Mm-hmm.
They just didn't talk about it, right? So to them, they were open about it. Now, later on, when I became, I don't want to say obsessed, but after all this stuff had happened to me and stuff, my mom tried to talk me out of, my interest in UFOs. But by then, it was too late because I was having all kinds of stuff happen, military experiences, alien abductions, reptilian encounters, things kind of like spiraled out of control there for a while, you know what I mean? But that was part of
had fear for you,
I'm sorry?
She probably had concern. It was probably fear for her.
Yeah, there was. And, cycling back to your question, that, in a nutshell, all those things I describe, and then I moved from San Jose, California to San Diego. That was a seminal event in my life because in San Jose, which I don't know what it's like now, but back then it was a backwater of UFO research.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, a lot of my friends, and it was interesting that about face, the turnabout, a lot of my friends in college and, that I grew up with and in the neighborhood and stuff that I hung out with, partied with all the time, they always thought, oh, James has always got something interesting to say, right?
Mm-hmm.
But later, because I was so consumed with learning everything I could about ETs and UFOs and was reading everything I could about them, and I couldn't help myself, I would just start talking about the subject, right? I'd find a reason, that's got something to do with UFOs, so I'll start talking about UFOs. And it got to the point where people would just burst into laughter when I brought the subject up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my friends in college who thought I was a really sharp, great guys I ran around with in London, I went to school there, really thought I was a sharp guy. They just, kind of would roll their eyes when I talked about it. And so leaving that environment in San Jose, California in the early 1990s, and then going to San Diego and joining the San Diego UFO Society, it was like night and day. Finally, I have people I can talk to. Finally, I'm plugged into a research network. And the guy who founded the San Diego UFO Society was really well connected. A lot of the researchers I read about and whose books I'd read, he was on a first name basis with these guys. He would call them up on the phone. This before the internet days, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So immediately I was plugged in. And also, we didn't shy away from the hardcore stuff, right? There was a weird dichotomy at work because I had a lot of misgivings and still a lot of residual fear about my abduction experiences. And then when I go to San Diego, not only do I meet, some hardcore researchers and others that had abduction experiences, but I started coming across a lot of these really new agey type of, people that all aliens were good. It's all for your spiritual development, yada, yada, yada. So that created some confusion in me, right? Because I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to feel a part of for a change because I come from a place where I was laughed at for bringing the subject up. Now here was all these people in San Diego, they're open to it, but some of them were of this new age ilk, you know what I mean? And so it created some confusion in me. And finally, it wasn't until I met Dr. Carla Turner at the International UFO Congress where she basically kicked me in the ass, in her speeches. And it gave me permission to say, that's right. I have been violated. I have been abused. Mm-hmm. I didn't ask for this. And I didn't ask for this as a means to develop my spirituality. What's that got to do when I'm scared of going to sleep? Or I got to drink myself into a stupor just to blot out the fear. You know what I mean? Because I went through a phase of self-medication. Very common amongst alien abductees. I didn't like to go to sleep sober. I'd rather be laying there with a room spinning around than that creepy crawly feeling of, being watched. And you know what I mean? And nowadays,
I had the same fears that you did. It was really interesting. And I actually saw this in my son, and I tried to bring it up recently to him, and he didn't have the greatest reaction to it. He was like, well, maybe it was the fact that you had me watch a Chucky movie when I was growing up. I was like, no, because it was so interesting to me when you talked about the nosebleeds, because he would get these nosebleeds all the time. Serious nosebleeds, but he would also tell me there was someone in the closet, someone under the bed, and and the thing is, he would tremble. So it wasn't just, he was a very loving, kind child, and I know that they were manipulating him and creating this fear in him. And so when you were sharing these things with me, it's like I had the same thing going on with me. It didn't make sense to me. I was scared of the dark. I was scared. I couldn't even have my closet door open. Like, I'd have to make sure that my closet door was closed, because if it was cracked, then that meant someone was watching me.
Yes.
So I'd have to have the closet door closed. I'd have to have lights on. I'd have to have sound or something, because that fear of just the dark quiet meant that I was vulnerable and that there was a potential for something happening that I wasn't okay with. So I really, really resonate and relate to what you're saying. And also, like I said, I've experienced that with my son too. And so I know there's some things that at some point he'll have to kind of figure out for himself.
Yes, because all those things you mentioned resonate deeply with me and countless other people, many of whom are going to watch this
Mm-hmm.
discussion. The whole concept of what they call wardrobes in Australia and in the UK, we call, those people in America call closets.
Yeah.
And it goes back to antiquity. The Lion, the Witch, and a Wardrobe, entities coming out of closets, because we now know that closets and wardrobes are a favored portal entry place for these entities, right? The serial murderer Ted Bundy said that scaly monsters, go figure, scaly monsters used to come out of his closet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was the same way. My younger brother was so skittish that he used to drive my dad crazy. He used to go around turning on all the lights in the house, and if someone turned off a light in the other side of the house, he would raise a ruckus. He would freak out. He would scream. He would cry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he'd gone through that. And what the people have to understand when they have not had these types of experiences, even if at a conscious level, we don't have a conceptual framework with which to understand what was going on. Even as a child, we know that the darkness equates to scary things and bad things happening to us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just reinforced in the morning when we wake up with nosebleeds, when we wake up with marks on our bodies and whatnot.
Yeah. Well,
And
see,
so,
I feel like the darkness, unfortunately, gets a bad rap because it goes back into what you were talking about, the New Age thing where it's all love and light, love and light.
yes.
And so it's like the organic, true darkness is not a negative thing, but
No, it's not.
Yeah, but the presentation that we're getting is very, very scary.
It is. And it was a crash course for me, because here I am in San Diego. I finally got people to talk to. Many of them, kind of the New Age variety. And then the other side of me, the linear logical side, which I had to come to grips and grapple with for a long time thereafter. I was still immersed in the reading, still learning everything I could. And it didn't take me long to realize also, excuse me, that, man, there is a long-standing military ET connection, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm a student of World War II. And so, like, when I read all these names, General Douglas MacArthur, General Nathan Twining, General Vandenberg, all these big shot Air Force generals and Army generals in World War II, all these big shot scientists involved in the Manhattan Project. Later on, it emerges through my research that these guys were involved in UFO ET research. They were involved in the back engineering and analysis of recovered alien craft, all the UFO crashes, et cetera, over the years. And so the transition for me, because of my background, studying military history, coming from a Navy family, I was a Navy brat. And then during this process, I started working for, ironically, U.S. Naval Air Force's Pacific Fleet. I was in communications, right?
See, I have to say something. This is so interesting to me that you're saying this, because I will tell you that everyone that I am coming across in my personal path has the same experiences and background that I do. One, that there's a military connection family-wise. My mother was adopted, but she was adopted into a military family. And her dad was a colonel in the military, and he's actually buried in the Arlington Cemetery, very close to Kennedy. And I was told that buried close to him, you had to be a significant.
Yeah.
And so what has occurred, what I'm figuring out is the military background is very predominant with all of us. And not only that, communications, because it never made sense to me the way that I grew up. And I actually went into a career where I was very successful, and I was a sales executive for Tyco Electronics, and I did voice and data communications sales, and I excelled at it and was it was something that was so far out of my concept of what I would ever do and for me, but I've come in contact with so many people that was military and communications. And so I feel like there's a reason that we're coming together. And just when you said that, I didn't know that about you.
Yeah.
That was it just struck me when you said that. So
And it should be understood, there's this meme going around that, oh, this is proof, it's all just military mind control. No, that's putting the cart before the horse. The ETs were here doing all this stuff long before there was the United States of America, long before there was a military, long before there was a military intelligence community. What happens is that because the military has access to all our medical records, right? I was a Navy brat, so in my formative years, where did my parents take me? To military hospitals,
right.
Naval Medical Center, Balboa Park, San Diego, Oak Knoll Naval Hospital, Letterman Army Hospital, and the Presidio. All these places later, incidentally, which became notorious for mind control, right? And it's not surprising. Now, why do they single us out? Because they have access to our blood work and our DNA profile. And there are markers within our DNA that tells people in the know, oh, this person is having experiences, right, with certain ET groups. So that's how we get plugged in at an early age. And so that was the case with me. So for me, the transition from being like a student of military history and then being a UFO researcher was as easy as like rolling over in bed. But just like sometimes you roll over in bed and you experience a really painful cramp, right? Every once in a while, you know, things happen during the course of your career as a UFO researcher that are stumbling blocks that you have to learn to overcome, one of which was a new age for me. And so although I never got into the new age per se, I was starting to pick up a lot of the lingo, a lot of terminology. I was starting to see things and everything was in a positive spiritual light because that's what people were saying around me, right? And so it wasn't until I saw.
It's easy to do that when life has been so challenging that you just want that love and light. You just it's almost like the idea of heaven and this unconditional love, but it's not real unconditional love. It's not real light. It's just this false light. Again, the false dark, the false light.
Exactly, and we're going to get into that in the time we've got left. I want to, because the religiosity programming, the patriarchy, the harsh kind of orthodox religion programming is part and parcel of all of this. It's what's kept this whole system in place for so long, and what they've done over time very cleverly. The Archons have the negative interdimensional ET forces working through their hybridized bloodlines. They've created this new age kind of new cage movement to kind of ensnare people who break away from the religiosity programming. And so, you know, I don't know, to feel acceptance or to you know, be a people pleaser. I had a lot of issues to work out when I was a kid growing up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, I had narcissistic people, you know, in my family tree that, you know, and I had to endure a lot of psychological abuse, and, you know, my self-worth was, you know, down at the bottom of the ocean for a while. I had to really work on myself. But what was interesting too, Patricia, is when I look back, for example, I took a public speaking course in college. A couple of my mates in London said, you got to take this guy. He's the best public speaker. He not only teaches you about public speaking, he teaches you about life, which I didn't understand at the time. Thought it was a cliche, but boy, you know, they were right, because they taught women, you know, to, you know, have self-worth and not be a, you know, a pushover, and not be, you know, bullied by men, and you know, to stand up for themselves, and he taught us public speaking. And then later on in my professional career and whatnot, I found myself in positions where I'm like teaching courses in certain things. I found myself, I was always the person that was, you know, assigned, not paid extra, mind you, but assigned to train the new hires. James, you've got a new person, you know, train this person. It was always me that had to like give speeches and talks and demonstrations and all this stuff. So public speaking after a while became second nature for me, right? And so when Dr. Carla Turner gave that speech, it gave me permission. Okay, this is why I have all these misgivings, because I'm still sleeping with the lights on. I'm still kind of skittish about all this, but yet I'm around these new agers. I'm starting to sound like them. I'm starting to say the same things they are. when Candy Turner gave the 2 speeches I attended, and plus she was part of a panel along with Dr. Richard Boylan and another guy, and she ripped the both of them up one side and down the other, because they're like of the warm ET, love and light variety, right? And Candy wasn't having none of that. And so when I looked at Dr. Carla Turner, all 4'9" of her, and just this powerful, commanding presence, just talking about underground reptilian bases, processing plants where humans are being processed. Hey, folks, we do it to animals. If you ever watch a documentary like Food, Inc. or Cowspiracy, have you ever been a slaughterhouse? Okay, that's horrific. Mm-hmm. And that's what you're eating. And that's what, I'm not making any judgments about people, what to eat or anything, but people rebel at the thought that humans are not at the top of the food chain. Well, we're not. Okay, I'll just tell you straight up.
Yeah, I want to share something with you. I shared this when I did an interview recently. I want to back your point before you go any further. This is going to sound bizarre, but because of my connections to religion and because of the many incarnations I've had and what it meant to actually go into Judaism and the blood sacrifices that took place, I actually ended a contract with a being in this universe back in 2014. And it was the Saturn being that I had been involved with in religion. So prior to the election of Donald Trump, or the selection, the whatever, we know elections aren't real. This was actually a true takeover, a factional takeover. And it was so interesting because he came to me through a astral conversation, and he said, I want you to be very clear on something. He said, because I'm becoming president doesn't change your commitment to the contract that you signed in this universe. You are still obligated to continue on in your blood sacrifices.
Wow, that's pretty heavy.
So this was so interesting to me because I knew, and this was something that was really, I had been kind of warned about this prior to this experience a couple of years ago, in that when we have these contracts with people, we think that there are beings, entities that we just assume when the contract comes to an end, that's it. But they're always trying to get you to renew this contract. And so he was trying to trick me and put fear in me to make me feel like, okay, I had to, he threatened me. Okay. And so I knew he was going to be the president before he was actually put into office because of this conversation. And I was telling people, and they're like, no, he's just a puppet. He's just out there to make Hillary Clinton look better. And I was like, I'm just letting you guys know this is going to be the person. I immediately that day, the next day, went cold turkey and gave up any kind of meat, because I understood for me that meant I could no longer, because of my connection to religion, specifically Judaism and sacrifices, that the blood sacrifice for me with animals would loop me back into this matrix next go around.
Yes.
And so I had no option, and this is not a judgment for anyone, because everyone's where they're going to go, and I can't that's really irrelevant to me. I share and do this for people that resonate and want to, hear my story, your story. But it was so clear to me that I had to go cold turkey, and I couldn't tell everyone because I knew it wouldn't make sense. I'm just like, I'm becoming a vegan because it's just a health issue. It's just, I didn't want to really go there because I knew most people wouldn't get it, but I know that you'll understand. I had no option at that point. It was so clear to me, you're done.
Yes, because what happens is we ingest, along with the body parts, all the pain, suffering, and trauma those animals have gone through, and they're sentient beings. They know they're being led into the slaughterhouse. Yeah. They know that they're going to be slaughtered. And a buddy of mine that I do this work with, he's had a bunch of MyLab experiences, and he pointed out that he started getting attacked by what he perceived to be like pig demons and cow demons, right? Particularly cow demons. And then we had a discussion, and he's very intuitive. And, a lot of times we just go where, organic source leads us. And it dawned on us that what he was being attacked by in the recent past was kind of like the collective rage and the collective angst and terror of all these animals in the factory farms. They kind of congealed into a thought form, into a spirit form. Mm-hmm. Now, this guy is vegan too. He eats a raw food diet. So I don't know why they were messing with him, but maybe it's because he could understand. Maybe it's because he could perceive them, right? So, these cow demons basically were attacking him. And then we had this discussion, and then we realized that it must be due to the factory farming that's going on, all the collective terror, angst, and rage. Animals can get pissed off too, right? Pardon my Anunnaki.
Yeah.
And so, and it was taking it out on my friend for a purpose, for whatever purpose. And then that kind of reinforced, the message. And, people are at different levels. Some people still eat, some seafood, and some people are mostly vegetarians for the most part. And once in a while they'll have fish or shrimp or something. We're not making a judgment about anybody. It was just that also for health, and not just ethical reasons, but for health reasons, because I had problems with asthma, I had problems with gout. And so a meat-orientated diet densified and blocked me up and caused physical pain for me on top of that. So, I had to detach, and I can say that my health has improved radically. I haven't had gout in ages, and my breathing and everything else is a lot better. My clarity, right? And cycling back to what Dr. Carla Turner said, when she started talking about the processing plants, and I've since spoken to many people who've been to these processing plants. In fact, one of my recent guests on my show, she went by the pseudonym Sashida. She'd been in these processing plants. That should not come as a surprise, because what these reptilians and Dracos have done, folks, is they've interbred. It's the whole Nephilim kind of finding the daughters of man fair, took them as their wives, et cetera, et cetera. They've created this hybridized priesthood, this hybridized bloodlines, plural. And this is why, the garden variety serial murders you hear about, Ted Bundy and other ones that, are known to indulge in cannibalism and satanic murder and whatnot. They're garden variety versions of the elite pedos and elite murderers you find in Skull and Bones, find in the Bohemian Grove, et cetera, et cetera. Only difference is those guys, they get, networks to go out and find their victims for them. Like a lot of these serial murderers are either on their own, or what a lot of the profilers don't want to talk about, they're part of a network or a ring too. Right. Because, like attracts like. And the reason they wind up that way, psychology always follows neurology, which follows genetics. And so after, ages of, carefully pairing together people throughout the ages in these bloodlines, and also augmenting their reptilian nature through medical procedures and whatnot, literally changing them from the inside out. These people are not like us. These serial murderers, these pedophiles, they're hardwired differently, folks. And if you know what you're looking at, you can tell that they don't even look like us, some of these guys. I mean, take a look at Prince Philip, for crying out loud. That guy is about as inhuman can be. All you got to do is look at him. Or George Soros, for crying out loud. How do these guys wind up being royalty? How do these guys wind up sitting on a pile of money and using that money to destabilize entire nations, right? This is something we got to work out, but it comes down to the grassroots level, because those are the types of individuals that wind up in all these positions of influence and power at all strata of society, at all levels of bureaucracy. The system is geared up for them, and that's why we've got to detach, create our own little bubble for ourselves, and navigate our way through this, because our destiny is not to be recycled endlessly and wind up in the dark ages here. And collectively we can work things out, so we can make the changes, because it's not us that's behind the 8 ball, it's them. The energetic frequency shift is benefiting us. It's not benefiting them. No matter what they do, and they're pulling out all the stops, right? No matter what they do, they're the ones that are going to be behind the 8 ball. So just remember where you come from. And another point I want to make about the New Age, I almost threw the baby out with the bathwater too, because I was stuck in a Mr. Spock linear, logical kind of, and it's something I battled with all my life, because I knew I had some psychic ability and intuitive ability, because I had a lifetime of psychic experiences. Mm-hmm. But reading as much as I do and all this other stuff and all the programming, it kind of prevented me from, I threw a lot of what the New Age had to offer out with a baby water, so to speak, right? Mm-hmm. And now I come to understand, it's been, for some time now, I understand there really are Palladians, there really are Andromedans. And that's something that you, the listener, will have to come to an understanding and a knowing on your own. I can't make you believe that. It's something you either have encounters with these beings and know that they really are the beings they're presenting themselves to be, or you don't. You know what I mean? So that's another thing about the New Age. It could turn you off from the thought that, you know what, there may really be good ETs, that maybe they're not overtly, actively interfering in a big way, but they're working through people that are their genetic, spiritual kind of descendants, if you will, that are acting as ground crew here on Earth. And so, and I've come across many people over the years that I'm absolutely certain are ground crew for one or more, ET races that have been warring, incidentally, against the Draco and the Reptilians for a long time. That's another kind of lie the New Age sells, that everything is all about love and light. No.
Right.
In the cosmos, in the multiverse, it's constant warfare. It's constant warfare.
And so this is interesting because you have done such a fantastic job of sharing how you got interested and your experiences that you had growing up. Originally, I was going to let's go through all these races, but I'd rather save that for the next time.
Yeah.
Because you're touching on things. This is a really great place to start for people to get to know who you are, what you experienced. And then you're throwing out names like the Archons, the Anunnaki, the Grey, and the Andromedans. And so what I'd like to do next time we talk is after you share your experiences tonight, then we'll start to go in and just like get to the meat of each different race and talk about each race and, what their roles are on this planet and in the universe. And also one of the things that I feel you would probably agree with me on is we're all extraterrestrials.
Yes.
We all come from star families that exist in the solar system. I think it's really interesting that even on this planet, we talk about aliens. Like if you're not from, one country, from country to country, it's kind of
you're an illegal alien. Yeah.
So illegal aliens. It's really funny, but the difference, I feel like even the race things that we have going on this planet, I feel are an extension of what's going on in the universe, because we can try to pretend like duality doesn't exist. We can want to believe that we're all, just gonna get along. But the fact is that these racial wars and these factional wars are going on galactically.
Yes. Absolutely. As above, so below. Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's just flowing over. And sure, to me, when I say that, when I talk about unconditional love, or when I talk about, being one, for me, there's no such thing as one, like we're all one being. For me, one means unity. I feel like in our true organic states, our higher selves, when I say I feel we're one, I feel we're in a unified agreement, and we are at that place unconditional love. But the roles that we're playing, the things that are going on that we're doing that are outside of that, this is a combination of love, hate, good, bad, like good versus evil or whatever. Even if at our pure states that doesn't exist, that's what we're dealing with. This is the arena we're in, and these are the roles we're playing. And everyone's going to have their own opinion, whether you have free will here or free will exists outside of this, whether evil is real or not real, whether, there's just so many different things, so many different variables. So it's just good to be able to have a conversation, to explore these subjects and get everyone to just start questioning everything around them. Because the one thing that I've really become aware of is there is a truth that is beyond question. But for us in the state that we're in, the only thing we can do is question, and our truths are based on our experiences and perceptions. So for me, a knowing is something that I've experienced that has become something that no one can challenge for me, because I know that it is a fact.
Yes.
Outside of that, everything else is up for. And even if it's a knowing, it doesn't mean I'm going to try to convince someone else it is. It's just my personal knowing. But everything that is for me personally is not a knowing is up for discussion. for me to question and challenge myself, I mean.
Yes, I agree 100%. You see, and those of you that are watching this, don't take everything, please don't take everything I say on board. Filter it through your own, heart-centered space, right? You'll get like this discordant feeling in your heart center when something doesn't sound right or something disagrees with your inner higher self, your oversoul. You have a built-in BS detector, for lack of a better term. And see, we come from a shame-based background where we're taught to disregard our feelings. We're taught to be shame-based. We're taught not even to listen to what our own body tells us, right? Like an animal in the wild, especially ones that are preyed upon, they detect subtle differences in the atmosphere, not just like a noise or a sound or a scent. If there's something wrong with the energetic field, they don't stop to think about it. They just bolt because they know that there could be a predator lurking that's going to pounce on them. Thinking is too slow. We have to get to the point where we have this inner knowing. We pick up impressions around us. We have an energetic body. We have a physical body, and both detect stimuli around us. We just have to, shunt Mr. Spock aside. Like, for example, you read about these people that have survived in a combat environment for a while. They begin to develop a sixth sense. You hear the stories that go back from the Vietnam days where Army Special Forces would be working with Montagnard tribesmen, and they were astonished at the supernatural abilities these tribesmen seem to have. They could practically see in the dark. They can detect and see things which wouldn't show up in the infrared scopes, wouldn't show up in the image, night, vision scopes, nothing like that. But they were so tuned into the environment, right? Because they don't come from this program background where everything has to be reduced down to an atom or a particle. These are people that are tuned into the environment. We have to be aware of the nature of the multiple threat environment we're in. Okay, we live in a society where no other animal does this. Okay, think about this, folks. I used to start my lectures with a slide showing a newborn doe nestled in like in a hiding place, and I put it there to point out to the New Agers that the parents of this doe didn't stick that baby deer into the bush there to hide it because they were fear-based and spiritually unevolved. It was because the parents of that doe were aware of the nature of the threat environment in which they resided. That baby wouldn't last 2 seconds if it was out there like strolling around in the bush, right?
Right.
And so, but what do humans do? They willingly give their newborns to doctors, these psychopaths in doctors' costumes, where they jab them with several different toxic vaccines all at once. And even when their own eyes tell them that my baby is having a horrible reaction to this, screaming, arching its back, oh, no, that's normal. There's nothing, the vaccines are perfectly safe. In other words, a lot of people today have lost survival instinct. They've lost the ability or never had the ability to survive, let alone thrive in a multiple threat environment. Okay. Now, you and I can just tell from the vibe you give off, Patricia, and the impressions I get, you and I would have a lot of laughs if we hung out because we take this bubble with us wherever we go. We're aware of the nature of the multiple threat environment around us, but we're still going to be who we are. We're still going to have a good time. We're still going to be able to relate and love and feel and plug into the greater love that's around us.
Right.
Which they try to swamp all that with their harping, with their chemtrails and everything else. But you know what? It's something within us.
It is.
Our love is organic and goes within. It's nothing external to us. So it doesn't matter what they do around us. We carry this around with a bubble, like a bubble wherever we go. And so if there's a level of awareness where if we can maintain our heart-centeredness, our connection to organic source, and have a belief in our own destiny, no matter what goes on around there, make your plans, implement your plans, make your plans. Doesn't matter if the financial system goes belly up tomorrow. Work your plans, do your work, and the universe will make things happen for you.
Absolutely.
It will. And another thing also, you brought up a key point earlier, Patricia, is that these soul agreements that come from past, in truth, parallel lives, because all is the eternal now. But let's call it, for convenience sake, past lives in a linear sense. Whether it's through deception, through hook or crook, or through ego activation, or through duress, whatever the case may be, over these many incarnations, we've taken on board all this karmic baggage, all these agreements, all these subconscious agreements we've made. And other times, always remember, folks, that sometimes in some of our incarnations, we're the ones that held the whip hand. We're the ones that were kind of unsavory, not so pleasant people, right?
Yes.
And for whatever reason, the wisdom of our oversoul had decided there's things you can learn even at a subconscious level from these incarnations when you were not the good guy. Okay,
right.
So we are the sum of all our parts.
I absolutely take responsibility and ownership for that. And
me too.
Yeah, and so for me, you know what, the main reason that I'm doing what I'm doing right now is I know that it's really needed right now in this time period that we're living in, where so much of the veil is being lifted and consciousness is becoming, people are becoming more conscious. It's to empower them, because when you start to become conscious, there is still a fear level associated with it, because everything that have been told is a lie, and there's fear associated with it. So when we're sharing this stuff, it's not to make people afraid. It's actually, hey, we've experienced this, and look at where we are. I mean, look,
that's right.
We're strong. We're standing in our sovereignty, and we are we're not going to be silenced, and we know that we are infinite, eternal beings. So we have nothing truly to fear. We can get out of that fear mindset, and really stand in our own empowerment, like stepping into our own empowerment. And so that's why this is so important to me, to go from where we are now and then to let this flow, like I said, so that people can see where you came from and follow your journey as it progressed, and then see where you are today, which is huge.
Yes, and in the next show, time permitting, I also want to talk about the seminal influence Barbara Bartley had on my life, because Barbara Bartley was the mentor for Dr. Carla Turner. And, Carla learned enough on her own to branch out and delve into like more MyLab issues. Barbara was very aware of the MyLab issue, but she focused almost exclusively on the alien abduction issue because of the harm it did energetically, spiritually, etc., physically to, the people having these experiences. And I wanted to talk about the Breed Out the Love program, which Barbie identified decades ago, where they're systematically making young children be spiteful, rage-filled, spiteful, venomous little creatures. She talked decades ago about the meth agenda, which we're still feeling that impact, because now they got something called ICE, right?
Yeah.
Just like meth wasn't good enough, I guess. And so meth has a sympathetic resonance with these negative aliens. It enables these aliens, these entities, to take up the person as a host and work through them. And so I want to talk in the next show a little bit about, what Barbara taught me, which I confirmed in my own research. Again, because I didn't just take on everything on board that Barbara told me. I went with what felt right at the time. The stuff that didn't make sense, I just put on the shelf until maybe it made sense later, right? Mm-hmm. But the stuff that she taught me, that I was able to confirm in my own research, that was really empowering, because it just showed me that, Barbara had been in this field for 30 years. And then she took the time to teach me all this stuff. And I'm very blessed to have had a mentor of that caliber in my life. I felt it was ordained. I felt it was orchestrated, that I was meant to be her protege, just as Carla Turner was meant to be a protege. And what I've done over time is I've tried to pay that forward. I've tried to, let other people know that, these kinds of things do happen. And there's a way to navigate yourself through all this, but it's a process.
Mm-hmm. I think you do a great, I think you have a great way of expressing yourself. And I feel like that you communicate, I feel like you have a plethora of knowledge, and you are so good at taking that knowledge and putting it in layman's terms to where anyone can understand it. So that's what I really do appreciate about the way that you're sharing your journey, because you're making it so simple for the average person to understand what you're talking about. And it's hard to do that. It's hard to have a lot of information in your head and to express it in a way where you're not talking at people instead of talking to people. And you froze up. Can you hear me? Oh, we lost your sound again.
Shoot.
Oh, there you go. You're back. You're back.
Okay, cool. How long have we been on now?
A little while. I'm ready to wrap it up, aren't you?
Yeah, yeah. And again, sorry if I went overboard a little bit.
No, you didn't. Did you hear anything I just shared?
Yeah, you mentioned the thing about how I'm able to convey certain information and whatnot.
I didn't know
I really do appreciate that.
Okay,
right.
Good. Oh,
and
good.
So it's an honor to come on the show. Would love to do it again, and talk about all the different races and whatnot next time.
Yeah, so we're going to do this quarterly. So would you like to do it like
fine.
would you like to do it every 3 months or every 4 months?
Every 3 months is fine.
Okay, cool. So we'll do that. And what we'll do next time is you can go into a little bit more about your experiences with your mentors, because I can tell that's really important for you to share.
Yeah.
And so we'll do that. And then that's when we can start going into the different types of extraterrestrials, the star systems and things like that. I have some of my own experiences that I'd like to share, but I was really good tonight. I become a motor mouth, and I usually kind of take over. I try.
Oh, that's quite all right. I mean, I can. You just saw how much of a motor mouth I was,
No, but you're the one being interviewed, and I didn't overstep it tonight, so I did good.
Well, yeah, the next one, feel free to chime in anytime you want. It's a learning experience for both of us. And
yeah.
So, I really appreciated this. So I hope we got, a good recording in the can. The connection is getting a little unstable there at the end, but
we've got a great connection. It was just for a brief minute, so we're going to be fine.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So, that's what we'll do next time. And I just want to thank everyone, that's going to be listening to this. And for those people that have been listening to James for years, this may be repetitive. I'm not really sure if you've shared this, before in that much depth, but, just support James and follow the quarterly interviews that we're going to be doing, because I feel like a lot of good things are going to come up as we're sharing together with our own personal experiences.
Yeah, thank you for allowing me to come on here, Patricia. I really appreciate it.
You're so welcome, and thank you for being here. And you have a great day, and I look forward to doing this again.
Take care.
All right,
Bye.
You too. Bye.